Glass is a unique, incredible material forged from the most basic, ordinary substances on the planet, but alterable by nearly every element on the periodic table. We are still merely scratching the surface of its application and possibility. I've been lucky enough to grow up in a world surrounded by an awareness of glass, stained glass specifically. I'm not the first generation McElfresh. My passion for glass was passed down to me by my grandmother, then by my mother. I also inherited an insatiable curiosity about how the world might work from my dad, a PhD molecular and population geneticist. I grew up with glass in my bones and stubborn, persistent optimism in my DNA. I can talk about stained glass from the moment I wake up in the morning until the caffeine drip runs out at the end of the day. Just ask my kids. And yet, as long as I can remember, stained glass has also been presented to me as a thing of the past, a lost art. I found it incredibly frustrating even as a kid. I'd say, I do stained glass. And I'd get pretty much the same reaction every time. Oh, like, I love stained glass, like sun catchers? Pretty quickly I could finish their sentences for them. Jesus. Tchotchkes. Old stuff. For a art form so universally adored, how did we come to universally decide it had just aged out? And yet, the myth of inevitable decay told me that it was too pretty to be real art. I should study real art like oil painting. The myth of inevitable decay told me it was too old-fashioned to provide a living. But if I liked soldering, maybe I should consider a real trade, like plumbing. Even though everyone I met seemed to have an aunt or a cousin or a grandfather that did stained glass as a hobby or had taken a workshop, we couldn't find anyone to help our local church repair their stained glass windows. The hardest thing to come to terms with was how deeply ingrained the myth of inevitable decay was in my own glass community. It wasn't just the public being asked that we be put on the endangered crafts lists. Our own field had been drafting our obituary for decades. I too had just accepted this as truth. When I was asked to take on the role of executive director of the Stained Glass Association of America, I hung up my shop apron, set down my glass tools, and picked up my keyboard. I was honored to ask to be served and terrified because we were dying. So hopefully my persistent optimism would reveal some secret in the archives. If we were going to die, maybe we could at least go down swinging. And yet, as the first few years just flew by, the more studios I visited, the more communities I talked to, the more sites I got to see, the less anything about any of it made any sense at all. I met glass scientists who were developing a glass that could deliver cancer medication with microscopic accuracy. I visited a factory where they were developing glass that could collect solar energy for use in any building anywhere. The same year I became executive director, in 2017, the largest stained glass window in the world was installed here in the United States. It's the size of a basketball court. Jesus is like 40 feet tall or something. It didn't make any sense. My corner of the glass world remained siloed in spite of all this passion and energy. All we seemed to be able to talk about was how we were drowning in a tsunami of closing spaces and underfunded work with ever-dwindling resources. It was exhausting. I turned to giving tours. It became my favorite part of the job because it was an easy way to remind me of the hope I'd always found in this awesome material. When I bring a group in to give them a tour, I want them to set their things down and get comfortable. While they're taking in the wide shot, I want them to get ready to move because As soon as they're comfy, we're gonna get right up under the windows. I want them, I need them to see the windows the way I see them. We have shrouded stained glass in the wrong mysteries. It was never just popular. We did not keep making it just because it was an illustration for the illiterate. Stained glass is evidence. It is proof of life lived. Stained glass begins with human breath. The strength of our material relies on the casters and gaffers who know the exact shade of lava orange to turn the glass, to mix it, to fold it, to bend it, to stretch it. They've spent years mastering what seems like a fairly simple process of just throwing something around. Every time they touch the molten material, it leaves a mark. The fingerprints of every person who is crafting our palette is encased in the material. That's what you're seeing when you look at stained glass. You're seeing community. You're feeling nature. Glass is sand, and metal oxides transformed by fire, turned into art through the wisdom of the hands that make it. It takes a maker, and then another, and another. Scientists, chemists, engineers, stubborn optimists. In a world of automation, stained glass remains something that cannot be built without human hands and without being a team sport. My favorite part is soldering. My friend Indra's favorite part is painting. It may seem like we're working alone, but we're just doing our part to craft each individual piece. Even after it seems like a solid, rigid, fragile material, we can still do anything to glass that you can do to anything else. We can carve into it, we can sand it, we can cut it, we can sandblast it, we can acid etch it, we can throw it back in the kiln, heat it up, do it all over again. And every time we do that, we leave a mark, and we're adding more marks, and then more. And when the best artisans do this work, the mark disappears. Not because it's been erased, but because it becomes part of the whole. So that you, the viewer, can just enjoy the space that's been created for you. Stained glass is as much an art of light as it is an art of material. Light is never still. It bends, it moves, it shifts. The atmosphere is ever changing. That tree outside the window has now grown another 20 feet since we installed the window. We dedicate our lives to mastering this material, but it is as much about mastering the physics of light and listening to communities as it is about learning the skills that become muscle memory as you repeat them year after year after year. We chip away at the surface, and then we use this incredible, malleable metal. It's very reverse stained glass. And we build it up into this massive installation. We set up the scaffolding, and then we leave. And then we're gone. I've lost count of the number of times I finished an install after dark or right before a wedding starts, and we have to clean up and get out of there. Sometimes I just forget to take a picture. On tours, they'll say, "What do you mean you didn't sign the work?" It's not mine. I didn't build it for me. It's yours. Letting go is the best part of the process. Stained glass is a reminder that beauty isn't frivolous. It's essential. Building and maintaining community is hard. Serving others is hard. In a world of endless, monotonous, emotionless drywall and impossible deadlines, trying to connect to a world that feels increasingly fractured, Architectural craft creates a living, breathing environment for us to do our best work, the work we do when we come together. When our industry started believing in the myth of inevitable decay, we gave it power. When your mission becomes survival, you let a thing stagnate. Jesus, tchotchkes, extinction. So I'd like to reframe this myth a bit, if I could. Is stained glass sacred? It absolutely is. But when medieval monks talked about sacred work and sacred spaces, they meant setting something apart for the public good. Stained glass is an art form of service, of anonymity, of devotion. The studios that survive generation after generation are the ones with a deep understanding of setting aside their own ego for the greater good, to build something more than they could build themselves. And yes, a lot of stained glass is in sacred spaces. They are, after all, the original community centers. When I'm giving tours, I always get asked if the organ still works. Are there still Sunday services? I am here to tell you that Holy Day, no offense, is pretty much the least exciting thing happening in our buildings. Thanks to a landmark study by Partners for Sacred Spaces, we know that 93 out of 100 communities have programming. Over 80% of those served through the programming are not members of the congregation, and 76% of those programs would not be possible without the physical structure. Historically, sacred spaces give back 16 times more than they receive. Food kitchens, clothing drives, education programs, daycare centers, offices for underfunded nonprofits. Is stained glass a hobby? Is it a craft? You better believe it is. Those tchotchkes we've been complaining about, even going so far as to say that they've cheapened the craft, they are the open source life force of the craft. They feed the furnaces. Big professional studios don't use enough material to make all this pretty stuff. Unencumbered by making a living, hobbyists play, and they push us all. And in fact, even these last few years, our industry has grown at an annual rate of at least 5.5% a year and is expected to be worth at least $7.5 billion by 2033. Hobbyists keep the knowledge and passion alive when architectural demand wanes. It is because of amateurs. As you know, by the way, amateur is derived from the Latin amare, meaning to love. They are the ones that inspire so many of us to seek the profession. Are the big studios dead? Long gone? No, they are not. It is true. Tiffany didn't make it. He had to close the studio after the trends of the time. But we have studios that founded this industry in the United States that are now in their 4th and 5th generation. They have been working quietly for over 100 years. And we have studios now in their 2nd and 3rd generation, and we have feisty young studios ready to scale up. The only thing I found in the archives that was helpful at all is that we have just as many, if not more, people working in our trade today as we have ever had. In spite of all of the disasters caused by nature, in spite of all the inexplicable human hatred, stained glass and other architectural crafts steadily carry on because we have a universal desire as humans to create and to serve. When we make our mission merely survival, we forget to let a thing live and breathe, and yes, sometimes to change. Preservation today is sometimes mistaken as an attempt to bolt history to the floor. to freeze us in a moment of time. And the problem is, there is no such thing as stasis, only growth or decay. I'm not saying we don't have some major issues to solve in the preservation fields. And there is absolutely no doubt that our country is going through a period of massive change. Sacred spaces and other buildings will close. Some will crumble. We will lose some stained glass forever, just as we have before. But we will also continue to create. We will also continue to build. And we can ask better questions when we do that. The question can no longer be, how do we save stained glass? Instead, how do we embrace its potential? How do we get the right information to communities so they know to ask for better? We choose our myths. So let's choose growth and abundance. Let's choose beauty, not as a luxury, but as a message of relentless optimism for generations to come. I hope you will never look at stained glass the same way again. Thank you.